This is Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. Pushing you to year-on-year progression. With your host, Ross McKinley.
Yo, Ross McKinley, Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. A very special guest today. Some of you may have heard me talking on my videos throughout the years as my friend who is a nutritionist. My friend says, and today you're actually going to find out that he isn't imaginary. It's the legendary Chris Lowe. So Chris, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm very good.
You like that intro, son?
I like it.
I had that one planned.
I am real. I'm here, so it'll be great to be on the show today. Really looking forward to it. Be
awesome.
A very good conversation. It'll be good.
So Chris is elite in everything that he does. Anyone who knows him, he's got a fantastic social media presence. He's unbelievable at nutrition. He works with Wasps, rugby for nutrition, right at the top of their game. Essentially elite athletes, but in the past he has helped general population. He has done PT as well, so he's going to give away his insights into that. And he's also had the pleasure of dealing with me, being his friend for a very long time, including during university. We actually lived together. So you're going to get some good insights. Hopefully he's not going to dig us out too much with how I used to be, I guess. But yeah, we're going to get into it. So Chris, Wasps, rugby, nutrition. Where do we start? Take it back from the beginning, back to Wales, back to
Wales, the start of the start.
Yes, start from the beginning.
So I guess like in terms of the fitness side of things,
Yeah,
it'd be very much a case of always, I'm not exactly saying I'm in amazing shape now, but going back way back when, really so small, really skinny, always had this desire to improve fitness, physique, and that's where the idea of nutrition, training, and just exploring that really came to ground, really. So, I'm sort of 31 now, and I guess I've been sort of reading, looking into this since I was like, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah.
So I guess this, level of reading and, desire to improve has come right from there. So, back from the small town of Aberystwyth in Wales, had like my own little garage gym, my York dumbbell sets. I think everyone's got from Argos.
Yeah.
Argos, even used them during lockdown, so they actually came handy, kind of investment there.
Yeah.
I started sort of with there, and then just like the knowledge kind of acquisition and the desire to learn more just increased over the time.
Yeah.
Went to like university in both Cardiff, then up in Leeds to study sport and exercise nutrition, and it's kind of just stemmed on from there then. So,
and that was when we met, wasn't it? So, I met Chris, would I have been 21, 20, probably? When I first came to university, I was starting my undergraduate sport and exercise science, and Chris had already been to Cardiff, and we met at a weightlifting club. That's a true how cool friends meet at a weightlifting club, like a right set of squares.
Story time.
So we used to do weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting together back in the day, and it was from there we actually done a little bit of work for British weightlifting together. I think we helped them with some stuff, some volunteering work we've done, and we ended up becoming friends from them. So what I've asked everyone in the beginning, Chris, in this little introductory part is why is it for you now? I guess you've transitioned from being at university, very, very high level in terms of education, but now passing that on to your clients, which obviously are elite athletes who are working with Wasps. What is it that gives you your fulfillment, if you like? Why is it you think you've went down that path?
So from like the education, knowledge perspective, I guess when I was growing up, going through the initial part of the fitness journey, I just didn't really know what I was doing. And I'd read all like the wrong sort of articles, the blogs, take the wrong advice, spend a lot of time, effort, and sometimes money investing into this, and just getting no results, becoming incredibly frustrated, and then almost feel like a little bit lied to in terms of, but they do this and they get these results, I try it and I get nothing.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of frustration there, and I guess that's where one of my values come from now, is just the education and knowledge side of things. So for me, I see a lot of athletes going through that same kind of process. They're kind of trying things that isn't working. They're spending a lot of time, money and effort on this. And again, no sort of beneficial return. So for me now, it's like I can see where they're going. I can feel their pain almost. So for me now, it's like, right, I got the ability to transfer my knowledge and education to them.
Yep.
So then they can accelerate their progress and essentially take them out of that pain, remove them from that,
and
actually give them the answers that they they deserve, really.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, I really, really value the education and knowledge side of things, and this is why I want to make all athletes and everyone I work with as autonomous as possible.
Yeah.
So they know why and how they're doing everything, so they are self-sufficient and they can take ownership.
Yeah.
Instead of being like spoon-fed.
You're much more about teaching them it's not monkey see, monkey do. It's like really trying to teach them the reasoning why and give them the knowledge and the tools to do it themselves. And I think one of the things, I've obviously known you a long time, but one of the biggest changes, and I'm sure we're going on this in your business in the past 3 or 4 years when it's really blown up, is you've looked more at the psychology side of it. And I think you've went down that route because you've always been mega fucking clever. But like explaining that to your 6'4" rugby player who's fucking 240 pounds or whatever he is, and making him grasp that you need to eat this before you train and stuff, that I think has been where you've changed a lot the last few years, and that's why your presence has improved so much, because you're taking stuff. Chris's Instagram and his social media profiles are fantastic because as much as he is a nerd and he can talk about everything in such great detail, which is fantastic, he also does very good educational series where it breaks it down for like idiots like me, which is why I'm lucky to know him. And it gives you that. You'd always say the cleverest people can take something that's very complex and just make it so much easier in layman's terms. And I think that's what you've done really, really well over the past few years. And certainly that's a change that I've noticed. Would you say, I was thinking about this when you were saying that there, would you say you get more from educating people because they're athletes, so their purpose, think from their point of view, they just want to score a goal on a Saturday, try in rugby, knocking someone out in boxing, whatever sport it is, they want the result. But would you say for you, is your fulfillment, is your values linked to the result, or is it linked to educating them and then the result's up to them? How do you look at it? Do you take a bit of pride in both?
Yeah, definitely pride in both. Like I'm very much of teaching them the process, that blueprinting system, so they put themselves in the best possible position for the best possible outcome.
Yep.
So if they can absolutely nail that, I am super happy.
Yep.
Like ultimately we can't overly control outcomes, especially in like team sports.
Yes.
So, even if they do everything perfectly on an individual basis, but they lose the game, I'm still generally quite happy because they've implemented the plan, they've taken ownership, and they've just executed as suggested. They've done what they said they were going to do. So that was absolutely awesome for me. If they then win the game or win a race or whatever and they get PB, then even better. Yeah.
Better again.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
I almost wouldn't, I'm not going to say I wouldn't like it to happen, but if they got an amazing result, but they didn't implement the process properly and they kind of got that outcome by luck, I'd be like, oh, that's not great because you're not really reinforcing any good habits and stuff like that. So I'd much rather just just make sure they are, again, that keyword autonomous, they know what they're doing, they know why they're doing it, and then they get the outcome. Even better if there's like a challenge being thrown in there, like a logistical issue, and they have to change the program themselves, you know exactly what they're doing. And it's like, right, I know the principle, I need to move this to there, and then I can implement and get the same performance kind of gains.
Perfect. This is why it's so good to have all these different people on, because I can just go off on so many tangents when they're saying, like, we should talk about this, we should talk about that. Something there that I think for most people listening to this podcast, you're probably not going to be an elite athlete. You might be, if you are, welcome. But the likelihood is you're someone who's wanting to get in better shape, you want to maximise your life. That's what I keep saying on every episode. It's about getting the best out of what you have available. I think it's something Chris mentioned there, which is a real key word, if you like, is the outcome and accepting what we can and can't control in terms of outcomes. And I think that's something I'm always trying to reiterate, and I know I spoke to Reese about this in terms of weight cuts versus fat loss, and something that you might be getting stressed out about listening to this at the minute, though, is maybe weight gain and understand, or weight loss and understand. And what I took from that there, what Chris said, this is before we even get into the main question I'm talking about, is that actually he's much more focused on the process goals and educating people, and the outcome, which in some cases for those of you listening might be weight loss, might be muscle gain. You have to trust that if you can learn the process and the habits and you're educated, the outcome will eventually come. But each week, maybe when you're getting on the scales, don't be too distracted from it. Like Chris said, look at, did you do everything in your control? Did you do what you said you were going to do? And that'll set you up for long-term success. So that was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's nail on the head.
Good intro. Good intro. Happy with that. So, like I say, you can find Chris on social media. I'll put all these links below. I've got some questions for Chris. We're going to do 5 main questions or topics to discuss, and then we're going to get into a quickfire round at the end. You ready?
Perfect. Let's do it.
Awesome. So, as we've discussed already in the beginning, elite athletes is your game now. That's all you're mainly coaching, but I know in the past you've done personal training. You've worked your way up, if you like. So what are the differences you've noticed between elite athletes and general population, and what can the listeners or watchers, for those on YouTube, learn?
It's, I guess it just comes down to layers. Like, ultimately, the two most important things for both elite athletes and general population are portion sizes and food quality. They're the two most important things. So those things then just differ based on the demand. So elite athletes will have greater urgency with performance, their recovery demands, adaptation, more stress on the immune system. All these things we need to consider and acknowledge, essentially. So this is where you put more layers in terms of specific timings, specific macronutrient ratios and stuff like that. If general population, non-athletes, wouldn't say drop 5, 10, 15 kilos or something, it is an energy deficit. If an elite level boxer needs to drop 10 kilos, it's an energy deficit. The fundamental principles are still there. But within that, say, elite boxer, they need to focus on, right, how am I going to maximize adaptation? Then we look into protein frequency and stuff like that. How do I maximize my recovery? So glycogen replenishment, that's when we put more carbohydrates immediately post-training in that first 3 to 4 hours because we get heightened rates of replenishment. What's my hydration like? Okay, what's the deficit I've lost in the training session itself? All these kind of extra layers you need to put into. Even supplementation like, say, calcium, for example. Okay, if you're a heavy sweater, we know you lose calcium during that session itself. So therefore, to maintain calcium status within the blood, if you're not putting any in, where's it going to get it from? It's going to get from your bones. So therefore, bone mineral density decreases, increased fracture risk. If you do that 7 days a week for the next sort of 5 years, that's where you can get bone-related injuries. So you just got more layers all the time, and these little things you have to, again, account for. Where if you strip it back to, say, general population, it is, right, what's your portion sizes over the course of the day and course of the week? So you look at more weekly budgeting. 2,000 calories a day, 14,000 calories a week. Spend them as you want. Let's put a high protein diet in there to keep you satiated and have beneficial impacts on the muscle and perhaps fat loss as well. And then just don't eat like an arsehole most of the time, and you pretty much hit that goal.
Yep.
With then the elite athletes, again, you just got more layers on top of that because that's the fundamental, but then they just have more layers because of the urgency of performance.
So it's the level of attention to detail, I think, for both, does it in terms of the meal timings, obviously in terms of like the calcium thing. Did anyone listening know that? Because I don't think that I did. I should probably know it really, but that was, this is why you have these podcasts to learn these little tips. But that's just one example, is maybe the level of knowledge required, and then also the level that they want to know. So for those of you listening, you might just think, I just want to lose 6.6 kilos. I just want to lose a stone. But an athlete's thinking, I want to lose that weight and I want to perform better along the way. They can't afford to do the 28-day challenge. They can't afford to do a really harsh cut because of the potential performance detriment during that time. They'll be absolutely hanging out their arse. There's no way they're going to be able to perform optimally. I know actually I have had a lot of lads do the 28 days, professional footballers, semi-pro rugby players over the years, but they've always done it in their off-season. They've done it in pre-season. That's a good time for it. But certainly in season, the demands are very different. I was surprised at portion size and the quality as being your two things. So there's a difference. I wouldn't have thought. It's interesting for me, having known Chris for so long. I'm kind of in my head preempting some of his answers. So it's always interesting. I think, again, going back to the growth of the business and your stuff as well, these answers, and hopefully this podcast lasts for a long time. I have lots of people on, and we'll get Chris on again other days, but these things should always be changing. My opinion, Chris's opinion, you're learning more all the time, and certainly I wasn't expecting you to say the portion control stuff. I think that's probably something a little bit newer, a little bit different.
And also, I think you're always going to evolve based on what's in front of you, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just to experience, say, the calcium thing, for example. The reason why that example came to my head, because a few athletes had, over the past couple of months, had bone-related injuries, and I've had to do more reading into that area.
Yeah.
So this new sort of education and newfound knowledge is based on what's in front of me.
Yeah.
It's okay, right, I need to look into.
But you can see that application there as well. I think that's something that I see a lot of on social media, and me and Jerome touched on this the other day, is the difference between maybe is what I do for training. I consider myself similar to Chris in terms of master for training and transformations, but Chris with his nutrition. It's all right knowing this is why your chest isn't growing, or this is what you need to do for your biceps or your legs or your protein feedings throughout the day. People can regurgitate facts. That's what a lot of what taught to do at school, isn't it? Can you pass this exam? that's happening more and more on social media because people are creating stuff into nice little bite-sized bits of information. But the real practitioners, the people out there who are getting results, who are at the top of their field, they're the ones who can have the information, like Chris said, about sweating, calcium, but then say, right, people are sweating more, the lads that I'm working with, that's going to make them deficient in calcium. What could that then link to? Something I talk about with my clients is not just knowing and doing nothing about it, but then linking it back and taking it to where it could have an impact and saying, well, that might affect the bone mineral density, which then might affect the chance that you get a fracture in the leg, which then obviously is going to keep that out and it's going to affect performance. So you're connecting the dots, and I think that's the real difference between elite level coaches actually doing it, getting results, working with really good people, and coaches who are maybe regurgitating stuff. And this is in any field, who, yeah, they're learning facts and maybe they follow some good coaches. They might even follow Chris on the or whoever. But it's different just knowing enough to pass the exam or knowing enough to actually fucking implement it with your clients. And that's what you pay for at the top level, I think, as well.
And there's always like 3 areas you need to take into account is what's the research say? What's your past experience for yourself? What's worked, what hasn't worked? And then what's the preference of the individual, the client, the athlete you're working with? Then when you kind of marry the three together, you formulate some form of answer, and therefore that's your intervention, your strategy.
Yeah.
So it isn't just where perhaps before I very much just researchers like this is what research says, like fuck everything else, like let's just do that.
Yes.
Where now it's a case of, okay, what does my previous experiences suggest from working with hundreds of athletes previously?
Yeah.
And then what's in front of them? Like, what's their life? Like, who are they? What's their personality?
What's the chances of getting this person to actually do it? I talk about this, the podcast episode that it's actually launching today is all about that. Is it's different knowing what's optimal. So what's optimal is your elite athlete. It's the person who, if you had every hour of the day dedicated to your goal and you're at an elite level, you're probably going to do things optimally. It's what the research says, it's what science says. That's optimal. But what you've got to look at is optimal possible? And then based off optimal, work out what your best is, and that's what your plan of approach is. It's no good just saying, oh, well, we need to do what's optimal at all costs, because it might not be possible, it might not last.
So it's optimal on paper versus what's optimal in real life.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way to sum it up. Perfect. That rolled in nicely. So, next question. This is something that I know everyone who listens to the podcast, one of my common questions is around supplements. So, whether it's fat burners, muscle gain, what can you do naturally, test boosters. Very open-ended start to this question. But supplements, what's your overall thoughts, Chris? First of all, supplements, your views, what you use, what you don't, kind of thing.
So, we actually spoke about this briefly before we jumped on here.
Yeah.
It's a case of like, first rule, do no harm. So everything we do from both a supplementation or just a nutrition strategy either has to have a neutral to positive impact. Any sign of a negative, we do not run it at all. So that's first and foremost, like any sign of a negative, we do not do it. So myself being very much evidence-based in terms of I read research, see what the recommendations are, what impact it has for that population, for that mode of exercise, then we can formulate some kind of advice and recommendations there. But ultimately, I'll split this for my athletes into 3 areas. Health, which is essentially just minimizing nutrient deficiencies. Performance throughout the training week, so your training week supplements. And then you have your competition-specific supplements for that extra level of performance, that boost kind of thing. So throughout the kind of normal kind of training week, so from both health and training, I don't actually want athletes to take that much because you're always going to advocate a food-first approach. So from like a health perspective, during the winter months, so say autumn to spring, looking at vitamin D, because we're not going to get too much to our diet, so therefore we have to rely on supplementation because, again, sun exposure is non-existent in the winter, especially in the UK. So that would be one thing. And then sort of in addition to that, maybe if you don't like oily fish, you probably look into fish oils. And apart from that, like, it's a very, very short list. There may be a couple of things there we look at protecting the immune system. So perhaps increase your calcium intake if you can't, vitamin C intake if you can't get that through your diet. And that is pretty much it. You could look at little things like probiotics, but again, you should be able to get enough through your diet through fermented-based foods. So that'd be maybe like your health-related ones.
So vitamin D and fish oils are your first 2 definites for health. So write them down, people. I'll think of that in your head.
So if you can't have like maybe 3 to 4 portions of oily fish per week, then you probably will look at a fish oil supplement.
Cool.
So you want to average about 1 gram of EPA, DHA per day. So if you can achieve that via food, awesome. If you can't, perhaps supplement. Training week wise, we're looking at for myself, creatine, beta-alanine. The two big ones.
Beta-alanine's a good one. I didn't think. When I thought before, I didn't necessarily think of that one. So tell us more.
Beta-alanine is an intracellular buffer. So that acidity you get building up within the muscle via like just hard, intense training.
Yeah.
The acidity within the muscle builds up, and that affects like the muscle's contractibility and stuff like that.
But do you supplement with beta-alanine? Sorry, to interrupt you, bro. On top of, because some pre-workouts, I know in the list I give to my clients, I say here's what you should look for in a pre-workout. So citrulline malate, creatine, beta-alanine. Do you supplement on top of that, or is it like you literally go and get beta-alanine and have that as a side?
Yeah, so with beta-alanine, you need to load it.
Right.
So you need to increase the carnosine levels within the muscle, and that then buffers the acidity. So that's what we're looking for. And you need to roughly take about 4 to 6 grams of beta-alanine per day for about 4 weeks to see some kind of decent benefits.
Right.
You can start seeing benefits straight away, but from the research on a whole,
and you're probably not going to get that in most pre-workouts, to be fair, are you?
Even though they're it 3 days a week or something like that, you're just not going to.
That's interesting. Yeah,
so then you would take it every single day. And then perhaps maximum for maybe 24 weeks. So it could be for quite a long time.
Yeah.
To kind of increase carnosine within the muscle and then maintain it. So that'd be one thing. And then looking at creatine then as well, both for the physical and the mental side of it. So I actually recommend everyone takes creatine.
I do now, I do now for sure. So creatine monohydrate?
Yeah.
Just no loading phase, 3 to 5 grams a day, would you recommend?
It depends on the urgency that you need to get creatine in the muscle. So if I had an athlete or playing on the weekend and he isn't taking creatine, then I'm like, right, okay, if you want a muscle be fully saturated with creatine, let's load. And then you go into the weekend, creatine stores in the muscles, the pools in the muscles increase by maybe 20 to 40%, you're good to go. Where if you didn't have any urgency there, you just take 3 to 5 grams and you'll naturally have this muscle loaded within 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think that was one of the first things I learned at uni. One of the first papers I ever wrote at uni was on creatine. I think it was that after 28 days, the saturation in the muscle is the same, isn't it? It's just that if you're an athlete, if you've got a weightlifting competition or if you've got a football match or whatever it is and you haven't been taking any creatine and you need to get it in quickly, that's where the whole loading phase, like 20 grams a day for 5 days and all
Context,
that. Yeah. That's where that comes from. But from obviously what else you've got to consider, I mean, creatine monohydrate is dirt cheap, so I don't imagine any of your budgeting that hard. But what you've got to consider is if you are just your general population going to the gym, you want to be in better shape, you want to get shredded, build muscle, you probably don't need to load it because you're not doing anything that's that specific on a weekend or whenever. You're not competing where you need that boost right away, and you're going to save the hassle of loading with 20 grams for 5 days.
Such a pain in the ass.
Yeah, it's just a hassle. And for that, you would say, I know some people probably ask this, but you would go with powder for both of those? Tablet form powder, what would you recommend?
It's just easier, for sure.
Powder.
And then no need to cycle it either.
Yes, so that's a good point. You don't need to cycle.
Yeah, I guess like normal kind of protocols would be right, load for 5 days, then let's take a maintenance dose for 3 weeks or something like that, then come off and then go back on. Where the research has shown 30 grams per day, so probably like 10 times the recommended dose in a back of supplementation, and they supplement every day for 5 years. No adverse effects to health. Creatine's
one of the things I say to everyone. I think there's some stuff, some research, you'll know better, there's some research on helping with your heart and your mental function as well and stuff, I think. As well.
Huge for cognitive function, both from sleep deprivation and neuroprotective as well.
Right.
So we use creatine a lot with rugby players from like the concussions or protection against impact perspective.
Right.
Even like the subconcussive events they have.
Yeah.
We take it from that perspective too. Because if you do have a knock to the head, energy metabolism can get disrupted, and therefore creatine pools in the brain can just fill in those gaps to help with energy provision, and therefore they become depleted. So we need to take creatine for that as well. The brain is less receptive to the uptake of creatine compared to muscle, so you need about maybe a little bit more, maybe 10 grams.
Yeah.
So we take that, and anecdotally, because there's not too much research on it, unfortunately you can't knock people out and then give them creatine and see how they respond. Damn ethics. But just anecdotally, when I had players being concussed before, supplemented with creatine straight away, concussive based symptoms do improve quite quickly.
Awesome. Last section, so what we've done
competition.
Yeah, competition.
Caffeine. So I don't necessarily recommend high dose caffeine to start the training week.
I'm holding an energy drink here, you might see. I love caffeine. one of these a day is what I say. Just test your heart out, see what it can handle. Have one a day. That is not advice. Do not listen to that. I do enjoy energy drinks, though. Chris, go on.
The only reason why I don't is because if an athlete feels like they need to take 300, 400, 500 milligrams of caffeine, if they're big athletes like rugby players, just to get up for a training session, there's probably highly deficits in their lifestyle and their nutrition.
Right.
They're sleeping shit, they're not eating enough carbohydrates, not hydrated, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't particularly, there's no necessarily right or wrong to it, but I don't really recommend it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And then on the weekend, caffeine would be one of the first things I would recommend.
So when they're actually competing, have caffeine then, but not necessarily for training.
Yeah.
So for the people listening to this who are going to the gym Monday to Friday, training 4 or 5 times a week, would you recommend a pre-workout? Would you recommend a coffee? What would you say for those people?
Yeah, probably coffee is fine. For myself, I'll have a strong coffee before I go.
Yeah.
And then when I go mountain biking, I'll have more caffeine supplementation then.
And half-life for caffeine, I know I learned this when you're 6 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, 4 to 6 hours, call it 5 on average.
So what that means is if you have caffeine at 6 o'clock at night, it's still going to be in your system at 12 o'clock at night, and it's going to affect your sleep. So you need to plan when you're consuming caffeine to make sure that you're going to bed, or it's not going to. I always notice, particularly as well, joking aside, energy drinks. I do normally have probably one energy drink a day. I have my coffee in the morning. I normally have 2 coffees and 1 energy drink most days, not all the time. One of the things I notice with energy drinks, and some lads may notice, that can sometimes tip you over the edge for your caffeine consumption in a day, especially if you're having pre-workout as well. And then people might feel, if you struggle with anxiety, get nervous, you may be sweating a little bit more, people maybe think it's that they're actually anxious or whatever it is, it starts playing tricks with your mind. It's maybe just that you've had a little bit too much caffeine, and people don't actually realise that. That's one of the big things. What I also notice, and that I want lads to consider, I personally don't like fizzy drinks for pre-workout. That's just my thing. I would rather have a coffee or an actual pre-workout. You can cycle your pre-workouts. So you could have a stim-based pre-workout for your big days, and you could use that once or twice a week when you feel like you need it. And then you could have a pump-based pre-workout, which is like what Chris mentioned, might have better alanine in. Although now we've learned probably not enough. Might have some citrulline malate stuff to help you get a pump. Still gives you that buzz and those pre-workout rituals that I think are important. I think you should always have rituals before you train to get your mindset right.
Yeah.
But without the potential crash later on in the day. So that is definitely something to be aware of. And the last tip I've got for all you on this, which Chris doesn't drink a lot of energy drinks, probably won't know this, but something I noticed, so as you're watching on YouTube, say I'm drinking a can of Rain today. It's the Melon Mania flavour. It's fucking great. However, there's a big difference between energy drinks. Not necessarily, I wouldn't even say it's always the caffeine content, which you can get on the cans, but actually just how they impact you. And what I find is, if I sometimes, one of them people will go in a different shop, you go in the corner shop and you're like, hey, they've got this flavour of energy drink, I've got this, and you mix them up. Sometimes when you're having one, as stupid as it sounds, a bit like trying a new pre-workout you haven't had in a while, it massively affects my sleep that night. And it can be that I'm drinking it at a normal time. I might have it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, but I still feel a little bit jittery, or can feel it more than if I have my normal can of Monster or whatever it is. So sometimes consider maybe those things. Are you going over your caffeine amount for the day? Have you changed your pre-workout? Are you having a different type of energy drink? Sometimes it can be that something like this, which is more of a hardcore Rain, maybe is more of an actual gym pre-workout or energy drink. Sometimes maybe these hit people a little bit harder as opposed to a Monster, which is more mainstream. So be considerate of that. Just to finish on that one, Chris, for caffeine, what's the upper limit for caffeine a day per person? I know you'll probably know this.
Yeah, so what you mentioned there is really sort of key in terms of the negatives of caffeine. So caffeine can both be ergogenic, so performance enhancing, and ergolytic, performance degrading, should we say.
Yep.
And it's very much like an inverted U, right? So if you take no caffeine, obviously you don't get any response from it.
Yep.
Then you've got that peak kind of response. On a whole, it's between like 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram that you weigh.
Yep.
So let's just do easy maths. If you weigh 100 kilos, 300 to 600 milligrams.
Yeah.
Some individuals who are more sensitive to it can get away with about 100 milligrams.
Yeah.
So start low, then build up to find where that effective dose is. Mm-hmm. If you take too much, it becomes ergolytic. That's when you get anxious, irritable, nauseous, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where if you're competing, you probably are that anyway, so you don't further add to it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when it comes to caffeine or any supplementations, if you are competing, try them in training first. That replicates race day or competition scenarios, so there's no guesswork. You don't want to get to the weekend, you've got a big key event, and you just tank in 600 milligrams of caffeine. How are you going to respond? Who knows?
Yeah.
So don't guess it. And when it comes to competition itself, I actually recommend supplements over coffee because they're more reliable.
Right.
So if you have 200 milligrams of caffeine from a supplement is 200 milligrams. If you have an espresso or coffee or something like that, the caffeine content can vary massively, even if it's from the same coffee.
The beans or something, the coffee beans
the
used can
roasting, the
affect.
sauce, all that kind of stuff. When they've gone into, like, when they look at research and they've gone to one coffee shop, I believe it's Starbucks, like 7 days in a row, the caffeine content varied for like a single espresso between like 40 milligrams, like 170.
Yeah, I think I've either read that or I've seen that you shared it.
I think it's somewhere along that range. It's huge. So imagine like you go and you expect you're going to get 80 milligrams of caffeine, which is about the average.
Mm-hmm.
You end up buying you just have to be unlucky and you get the lower kind of dose and you get like a double espresso and you actually got 80 and you actually think like, oh, I didn't do too much. Then next week you're like, right, I'm going to get triple. But yeah, then very lucky and you get like the higher dose and it blows your head off because you have like pretty much 5 times the dose from previous week.
Yes.
So we don't want that. So let's just have a caffeine supplement.
I think caffeine's a really good one to talk about because I think everyone at some point in their day has some form of caffeine. Everyone has a coffee or people now energy drinks or pre-workout, whatever it is. I think something else to consider is maybe your timings throughout the day, and if you do have a pre-workout or what the time when you most need caffeine is looking at the effectiveness of caffeine and also potentially maybe some areas that you don't realise you're getting it. So is it that is it a can of Coke? Is it your tea? There's loads of, and it might only be a small amount of caffeine that we're talking about here, but if you're having, say, 4 or 5 cans of Coke a day, probably not if you're fucking dieting, but there is going to be some caffeine in that, and that's going to have an effect, and that might then affect the effectiveness of your pre-workout, of your coffee, of your other stuff as well. So try to think in your day now, just in your head, like what is your caffeine source as well, and are you putting them in the right place to get the maximum benefit? Good.
A big thing for me is the negative impact on sleep. And you mentioned like the half-life there.
Yeah.
Like what's probably one of the biggest performance enhancers out there? Sleep.
Yes.
And if you're taking caffeine at high amounts in the evening, you're just going to ruin your sleep quality. So yeah, it's going to have to not going to be ideal, is it?
Awesome.
So yeah, just be really mindful around that. And for competitions, if you've got a competition at night, then it's like, okay, then let's kind of knock it on the head. We'll have a bad night's sleep, but we know that your performance is going to be well. But if it's just like a normal training session at night, probably go easy on the caffeine later on.
Awesome. So supplements, to sum up, you can test if I've been listening. Vitamin D, fish oil, creatine, beta-alanine, caffeine.
Perfect.
So they're your 5.
Yeah. So they're like, my 5, and then you could look at different kind of buffers depending on what kind of sport you're on for competitions, like sodium bicarbonate or citrate or something, but they are literally like way up out there that I really kind of use.
One thing I want to touch on before we move on to the next question that I think a lot of people will be thinking, the effectiveness or not of over-the-counter supplements in terms of natural testosterone boosters and also fat burners. Just your overall thoughts. I know I mentioned about do no harm at the beginning, so we're not talking about anabolics here because of the negatives, but just generally, so when we see these test boosters and stuff, what's your thoughts, mate?
For fat loss supplements, they will pretty much do absolutely zero.
Yeah.
Supplements that build muscle, if they work, they're banned. They're called steroids. So if a supplement that you can buy off the shelf promises you can build muscle, it doesn't. So the best supplements to build muscle are the ones that improve performance, so you can train harder.
Yeah.
So your creatine, your beta-alanine, your adequate amount of calories, your hydration, your sleep, those kind of things.
Perfect. Brilliant. So to sum up, if it's not those 5 things, you've maybe got a couple of add-ons, your whey protein, maybe it's essential aminos, your carb stuff. That's their additional, their bonuses, if you like. But in terms of your health and your general performance, those 5 things, if it's not in those 5, just probably don't bother with it. So yeah, cool. Right, next one. From a nutritionist's point of view, from my friend who is a nutritionist, as I always say in my videos when I try to validate what I'm saying, I want one must-do. So everyone listening, so if we're saying these lads listening are training 4 or 5 times a week, they're either want to build muscle or want to lose fat. What's one must-do in terms of nutrition, and what is one don't do? Piece of pearl of wisdom from you. You've given me a lot so far, but what would you say?
The must-do is consistency.
Okay.
I think that is probably one of the biggest things, because if you're consistent with everything from your training, your sleep, your nutrition, your macronutrient intake, all that kind of stuff, and something isn't working, then you know what to change. If you're very inconsistent, then how do you know what to change to improve, to get over that? Like if you're, say, from a training perspective, program hopping all the time, you're not going to see any kind of progression there. So how do you know if it's working or if it's not? If you're not dropping body fat, but your calorie intake is all over the place, is very undulating, you're kind of tracking calories here, you're forgetting to track it there, you're eating intuitively here, you're following a meal plan there, like it's all over the place. It's hard to know what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
So to identify what's working and what's not, you have to be consistent. And then when you are consistent and you do it for a long period of time, then you can start to see trends and therefore you can adjust accordingly then. So that's probably from like a coach's perspective, I guess, because when I say looking at, say, meal planning or MyFitnessPals or whatever, and it's like, right, I'm really accurate, honest with my track and reporting, bang, 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 I can see what I need to do.
Yeah.
And then if you kind of flip that on the other side, what's one thing that they shouldn't do is probably justify their own bullshit.
Yes.
That's one thing. So as humans, we're very, very, very good at over-reporting the amount we move, step counts, activity, and under-reporting the amount we eat. So we're very, very, very good at that. Many individuals who can't drop body fat, they either overthink or overestimate how much they move around and underestimate how much you're actually eating. Oh, I'm only eating 1,500 calories. You're putting away 2,500 calories, easy. When you actually go through it all and identify it, sometimes like it's just pure like negligence. You just don't know. It's like, oh, that latte had 300 calories. I had no idea. I thought it was water.
Yeah.
Where some people is like, yeah, that does have 300 calories, but I'm going to forget about it and not put it in my MyFitnessPal or track it or anything like that.
Yeah.
And they just kind of justify it, So that's one thing I see a lot of people do. And it's probably the biggest thing that's holding them back from dropping body fat, for sure. It isn't because they got a slow metabolism, their metabolism crashed, is broken. It's because you're not tracking your food properly. That is a massive thing. Ultimately, if you're not dropping body fat, you're not in an energy deficit. Like that is fat loss 101. There's no other way around it. You're still eating too much, unfortunately. So it's probably 9 times out of 10 a tracking issue, is a reporting issue. So things to do, be super consistent. Things not to do is don't justify your bullshit, track properly.
Brilliant. I love it. If you ever find that you're logically reasoning or trying to explain to yourself, to your coach, to anyone about why you're doing something, I've covered this loads, but it's normally a bad sign. It's like, oh, I've done a little bit extra work today, or I had to walk here, or I had a tough day at work, people with manual jobs as well. Everyone's life, unfortunately, is everyone's life. Doesn't mean that I'm not considerate, haven't tried to have empathy for you in terms of everyone's different challenges, but Chris is right. In terms of your physiology, everyone's got their own story in terms of that obstacles and things you need to overcome, but you need to overcome them. But in terms of physiologically, what we know in terms of being in an energy deficit for fat loss or being in a surplus for muscle gain, it's pretty black or white. You either are or aren't in it. And no amount of, but this and but that, and I forgot, that won't get over because physiologically it's just a fact. So, and unfortunately, it's sometimes hard to tell people that when they say they've stuck to the plan, but it's maybe not went the way that they thought it would. And yes, you can have anomalies. You can have 1 week where maybe things stay the same or there's not a lot of change. But generally speaking, no one gains 3 kilos in a week when they're in a fat loss phase. It doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it might just be that you're holding water. No, it's not. It's like, fucking hell, you're doing well, mate. So yeah, you might have the odd meal. You might have just had a lot of carbohydrates. You might have a little bit of sodium, a little bit of inflammation. But generally speaking, there's the whole thing of a plane. Its course, it's never exactly on track, but it's headed in the right direction. Yeah. That should be the case with your fat loss or with your muscle gain. Yes, you might have the odd week here or there, and that's when what Chris said first, the consistency comes into play. Don't be swayed by, a bad week, but equally, you need to be making sure that you're consistent. So that's brilliant. That's a really good one.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, like, again, if the maths doesn't add up, it doesn't add up.
Yeah.
If they're roughly burning 3,000 calories a day, and through all the training and steps they're doing, but then you're reported to have 2,000 calories a day, that's probably around 750, 1,000 calorie deficit with a little bit of adaptation built in there. So you should be dropping. If you're not, then you're not eating 2,000 calories.
Yeah.
It is as simple as that. And I think that was one of the things I learned very quickly early on in my sort of career. Is like, right, they were kind of saying like, right, I'm doing all this training, I'm eating this food exactly, but I'm not making progress. I'm like, fuck, it's like, am I shit at my job? Or like, what's going on? I like, you know, had like a lot of like imposter syndrome from that. And it was a case of, you dig deeper and it's like, okay, yeah, you're just over consuming calories, aren't you? It's like, yeah. It's like, right.
One thing I want to touch on before we move on, because I think this is a good point for anyone on a diet. Does the metabolism catch up with the calories, or is it just that when they're dieting down, they stop moving as much because they're tired, and that's what causes the deficit to be less?
That's the main driver, yeah. So this kind of subconscious laziness, like fidgeting of your hands and walking around, that kind of stuff does get decreased for sure to preserve energy. So that's the biggest thing. So you become somewhat sloth-like. You move around less. I know, like when I was in a big energy deficit last year, I found myself, even like within the gym, I get through the set, that's fine, but usually maybe I'll just stand up, where that time I was leaning against the rack or sitting down, and just little things like that, and it can make quite a big impact in terms of overall expenditure for the day. 500-600 calories quite easy, and that's why it's important to have a step goal, I feel, to then just offset that, to offset that kind of level of adaptation there. Yes, like if you have a huge transformation, you were 120 kilos, now you're 80, you're now a smaller person, so you're going to be burning less calories as a result. So that's one thing. So they're the two kind of main drivers. You get some adaptations to the metabolism, so like your resting metabolic rate and stuff, but kind of top end, that's going to be like 10-15%. So maybe a couple hundred calories. So there's a few things you need to take into consideration, but if you're consistent with your training, your step count, your calorie intake, this should all be very much predicted, and you should be able to see this trend over time.
I think that sometimes when people start a transformation, they get a lot of results or a lot of success in the first few weeks. And then it levels out in the panic, but then you've got to look at maybe what you've stopped doing because you thought that maybe you're on track. And I think if you're doing everything right, like Chris says, if you're consistent, if you're doing your cardio, you've got your steps or whatever your coach. I personally don't use steps as much with my clients. I give them cardio minutes, which is still a form of that, if you like, to make sure they're doing a set amount of cardio. But as long as you're doing all that and you're doing it with the same intensity, your fat loss will continue. A great example back in the day, if you remember when we done my first bodybuilding prep when I was 20 or something, me and Chris, I ate a lot of pollock. If anyone's ever ate fish, fucking hell, I've never again. But me and Chris done the diet. Well, Chris done it, and that we kind of had a bit of a discussion. I don't know when we kind of coached me through it together, didn't we, as a team? And that was my first prep. I done it pretty much all myself with Chris's help. Well, obviously that was when we were living together, and I think we changed my diet twice. Very little, if you remember. We wrote the diet in the beginning. I started losing weight. It was an 11-week prep. I was absolutely shredded by the end. I looked ill. And I think I literally changed the diet twice. We didn't make... So I think sometimes people, when they don't make progress 1 week, they're like fucking, as they're saying, throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. They're like, oh, fuck, I need to drop calories, I need to do this, I need to do that. It's like, you need to do what the fucking plan is, mate. You need to make sure that you're doing the cardio still and train, or what is the other reason that this hasn't worked? Because once you start hacking away at calories, you've got to realise that can't go on forever. Once you get to a certain point, that is it. You will be losing, especially doing it naturally, even more muscle than you need to if you take it too low too quick. And certainly we've seen in the past, both with myself, my clients, and when we've worked together, you don't actually need to do that if you just stick to the plan. It will just keep coming off. I think now people always want almost... might be from a value for money perspective, which I can understand. When they're working with a coach or when they're in a program, I have lads sometimes say in the 28-day challenge, like, I've lost 2 kilos this week, can I still drop calories? No, you don't need to. You literally, imagine it as a game of cards. I've used this analogy loads. You don't show your hand before you need to. You play it one card at a time. You've got all these different tools, whether it's dropping calories, adding in more cardio, looking at possibly when you get the real tail end of the prep, as much as I fucking hate coaches talking about it, but you could look at steps and general activity levels. And you've got all these little things you could be doing. You could be putting an extra walk in before bed. There's loads of stuff, but it's one thing at a time. It's never everything at once.
And that's where consistency comes in. Because if something stops working, what do I need to add in? I really actually like the point where it just came to my mind there, when you add in more minutes of cardio a week or a month or whatever, whenever you need to. Like, obviously, like if you're getting slow adaptations to metabolism or reductions in needs and stuff, and that happens as you drop body fat, or as the energy deficit sort of increases, or low energy availability, which is basically a deficit, you're kind of overriding that like natural kind of decline by adding in
That's what I do.
So it's just a nice way of doing it.
That's what I do with my clients as well, particularly my 12-week clients, my one-to-one clients. They normally all send us photos. So Nick, one of my good friends, I know he listens to the podcast, he's doing really well. He's lost 10 kilos since he started working with us in January. Took it really slow, but one thing that he does, which I really like, and I've noticed that the people who do the best that work with me do this, he sends us a photo of his bike screen every morning when he does his indoor bike in his house, Scotland. In his living room, sends us a photo. Why is that important? It's the accountability side of it from him, but also, as much as I don't reply to him fucking every single time, I might give him a thumbs up or whatever, what have I learned? Well, you'll be listening now, but I know that in 50 minutes, Nick does about between 21 and 22 kilometres every 50 minutes. So if he gets to the tail end of the diet and that starts dropping to 18 kilometres or 17 or 16, I know that with maybe the diet went too far, he's had a bad day, maybe his head's not in it that day, but all of a sudden you've got more data which can indicate that you're keeping on track, and that's what adds up. I'm not a fucking magician. It's all in the same with Chris. It's that we've learned over years, like both from a psychological perspective and giving people accountability and pressure to do it, but also then the information that we need to make sure that they're on track. I heard a great story, we're going a bit off track here, but I follow bodybuilding, I love bodybuilding. And of Chris Lowe, who's massive in the bodybuilding world, prep coach. Ron Partlow and Dusty Hanshaw have a podcast called It's Just Bodybuilding, and Ron talked about, I think he was 8 weeks out of a show and he wasn't in good enough shape. And Chris Lowe, I don't know any of these people personally, by the way, I'm just referring to them like I do. And he said to him, right, from now on, you're 6 weeks out, every day, I want you to send us photos. Every day he wanted photos of all these mandatory positions in a bodybuilding show. Now, very few people listening to this podcast will probably compete in bodybuilding, but if you do, it's a little trick. But in general, why do we think that worked? And it might not strike you right away. He was getting extra calories burned every day from having to do 10 or 15 minutes of posing every single morning that wasn't cardio. So all of a sudden, it didn't have anything to do that he needed to see him every day. And apparently this Chris Lowe afterwards, he wasn't even looking at the photos every single day. It was purely to get him in shape quicker by just saying, do some posing. It was a different form of cardio. I was like, oh, Mint, he wants to see us every day. What kind of level of coaching is this? Fucking class. He's looking at my photos every day. In reality, he's just getting you to drill the positions and drill the poses, which obviously is mega important in bodybuilding. But also, from another perspective, they're doing 15 minutes of massively flexing their muscles and they're getting fired up for it. There's the accountability point of view. That is such an art to coaching that people don't see. It's like, that is mega clever. Like when I heard that, I was like, clever bastard. That is so good. I was like, that's great. I
like that. That's good.
Right, next questions. We've got two more and then we want a quick fire round. So, Chris, I hope all of you go and follow Chris after this, but Chris is, I would say, one of the most dedicated and consistent people, funny enough, because he fucking said it, people that I know. So I've got two questions for Chris here, and I think this is going to help all of us in our careers and everything that we're trying to pursue, and that is, the first one is, how do you think, Chris, that you've kind of got to the top of your field? How did you become elite? What do you think, maybe it's not necessarily what separates from the coach, what do you say made the biggest, what was the aha moment, if you like, where you're like, right, this is what I need to be doing, or what kind of think made the biggest change to you in your career?
I say, I don't know, it sounds a little bit cliche, but probably like the discipline side of things, just like I like to think that my day, my diary is pretty much packed in terms of is all kind of accounted for. Like, yeah. I know, like, right, I'm doing this year, and it's just like a checklist. I know what my daily non-negotiables are, I know what my goals are, never negotiate with your goal. And just literally just do that every single day. We kind of touched on the process side of things, but I'm very process driven myself. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, I care about the outcome, but the outcome will be the outcome whenever I kind of get there.
Yeah.
So I know what I need to do on a daily basis to move me closer to this goal of being the best nutritionist I can be to help elite athletes get to their goals. That's where I get like my fulfillment from. So for me, it's just the discipline, just like, right, I know these are my daily targets. Mm-hmm. If I do this every single day, there's no way about it that I will not fail. I will move closer every single day. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what it is, in whether it's like business, whether it's in sport, training, whatever. It's just set the goals and then do what you said you're going to do. Yep. Just do it every single day. You're naturally going to find like days I work like in terms of like high demand, low demand. I'm very big on like the periodized life. So yes, we periodize our training into high days, medium days, low days. We periodize our nutrition accordingly, but then just acknowledging what the stress of your life is in that day as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, yesterday was a Tuesday, and we're always done with Wasps rugby on Tuesday. It's 120 miles away. I get up at 4:30 to get down there for meetings at 7-ish. Depends what traffic is on the M1. Big day there, and then travel sort of 2.5-3 hours back. I'm probably not going to do a really big session at that day because I'm just going to be pretty whacked. But the following day, I'm in the office and, well, at home. It was a pretty chilled out day.
Yeah.
Then I can handle more stress with my training and all that kind of stuff. So it's just knowing when to push and when to pull, and then periodize the whole life around it. So I'm just being really realistic of how much I can do on a daily basis. That'd be a big thing.
Yeah.
Because I was quite guilty of trying to put too much in, almost like running over 10 minutes every single hour.
Right.
But then I get a lot of stress, lots of overwhelm, and it just ultimately didn't work.
Yeah.
So just knowing what I have to do on a daily basis, be really strict with that, be realistic of what I can achieve, and then, like I said, do what I said I was going to do. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I do it, and then that just happened over time.
You've
Like,
learned off
it
it.
isn't that like overnight success kind of story thing. It's just that thing you've been doing it for a long time.
Overnight success takes 10 years. It's a great quote. A lot of people say that. So it ties in nicely. Based on that then, question 5, the last one is, what would your productivity or routine tips? So based on your routine, how productive you are, maybe he's having a diary, what would you say? What's your tips for productivity? Whatever the people listening are doing, what would you say?
Delete social media.
Really? Well, that does help, I guess.
So what I've done is just making my environment supportive of my goal.
Right.
So
Cool.
and one of that within the environment is my phone. So all the apps, notifications are turned off. So no, if I'm messaged or rang or something like that, except for ring, I guess, I'm not reactive to what my phone is doing me. It's not drawing me away from my task. So that'd be one thing. Turn notifications off on your phone.
I do that as well, by the way.
All non-essential kind of apps, just kind of delete. Facebook, I don't have on my phone. Twitter, I don't. LinkedIn, I don't. The only app I need to have on my phone, social media-wise, is Instagram to post on it. But then I got time on that to use 30 minutes a day. After that, it locks me out.
Really?
So I'm just really strict with how much I use
Fuck me,
social
that
media.
is intense. That's good.
You just procrastinate on otherwise. Like, you just get drawn into one thing, then next, then like a meme comes up and you see like a new page. You're like, fuck, this is hilarious. And you
Busy
just go-
tasks, isn't it? The task expands to fit the time you end up stuck doing busy tasks, working in the business, not on the business, as they say. Go on, keep going, mate.
So that'd be an absolutely huge thing. So I'm very much in control of my time. That's a big thing. So no one else is kind of pulling time away from me, whether it's an app or whatever, stuff like that. And then, again, a big thing for me is just being realistic of how long it takes to do a task. So then I can fit everything in, things don't roll over and stuff like that. I think that'll be the phone thing and the environment thing is a really big thing. Like for me, like I just like to have things quite clean and like sort of basic kind of things, not many distractions going on.
Yeah.
So my office is like everything's like in its place and I'm not distracted by
Yeah.
X, Y, Z, you know. I don't know where I'm going with this, but for me it's like if that's all clean, it's decluttered, I could just concentrate a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that just
I think that's really good. Not a lot of people know that you can turn notifications off on your phone. So you can go in the notification settings on an iPhone or any phone and you can choose what you want to be on or off. You can still have your messages come up. I have, like, for example, WhatsApp for all my one-to-one clients. I have my iMessage from my friends. I don't have social media notifications on because, like Chris says, you should be the person who is... Time is our most valuable asset. We're the ones who should be in control of it, not like, oh, ding, ding, oh, I've got a notification on Facebook, I need to go check what it is.
Yeah.
It's never that important, normally. Very, very rarely. So, yeah, that's...
Just low value
Brilliant,
tasks.
mate.
Like, 100%.
Fantastic.
Like, I know I am reactive to my phone and stuff, so I have complete control of it, so I just turn it off or get rid of it. Aspects of it. You can get these little boxes where you put timers on.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Those kind of things. I haven't gone down that route, but
Yeah.
you could even do something like that. And you'd be surprised how much better you can think and how much clearer you can think when you don't have your phone all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I actually love not having my phone on me. It's great.
Yeah.
If I go for a walk, it's like I just leave the phone here, just take my keys and just go for a walk.
But Chris, how would people track their steps?
You gotta walk.
That's
You
it.
gotta
That's it. That's the thing. So, right. That is the 5 questions. That was awesome, mate. Thank you. We're going to finish with what is going to become the legendary quickfire round at the end. So I'm going to just give you basically a yes or no answer on some stuff. Just say the first thing that comes into your head. If you want to elaborate, you can elaborate. If you don't, you don't. Got 4 fairly easy, 4 a little bit more difficult. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. So, rugby or football?
Rugby.
It's a shame. Cardio or weights?
Weights.
Carbs or protein?
Carbs.
You're a big carb fan, aren't you? Chris loves bagels.
The pumps you get from bagels are great.
You love your bagels.
You go jam, you go honey on it, you get them down.
Bulk or cut?
Cut.
You're shredded at the minute, aren't you, to be fair?
As much as I like being really patient with things, you can see much quicker results from a fat loss phase. You see progress every week, so I'm almost drawn to the results. And again, I said I'm not outcome based, I'm more process, but that outcome does drive the process a little bit.
I mentioned that. If anyone hasn't listened to it, if you go back, I think it was the second or third podcast episode was all about this and why I think most people should start with fat loss, and that is exactly what I said. You see week on week results, and that makes you feel so much better about the process, and it builds intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in that you're enjoying the process as well as having that outcome-based goal, and that ends up with you then almost got this bank of belief that you can then use for a muscle gain phase, which is much, much harder. And
it's a lot longer as well. You just have to be, just again, very process driven, and you're just focusing on like performance all the time. And it takes a long time, doesn't it?
It's fucking hard. Worst place visited?
I was not expecting this one. Place.
It's funny putting him on the spot. He's always so organised.
UK or like worldwide?
Wherever you want.
Just the worst place.
I mean, just in case you know anyone there, I probably wouldn't do the UK. I'd pick somewhere abroad because
I'm not very well travelled. My brother-in-law stag do down south of France. I can't remember where it's called now. It's such a bad place. I've forgotten the name of it. We watched a Tour de France down there. The Tour de France was cool, but the rest of the place was a shithole. Didn't like it.
Okay.
I can't remember.
South of France.
But I hear the rest is lovely, except for this one place.
Je ne sais pas. That's all I know. Best place visited?
Big fan of Norway when we went there.
Yes.
Really like that place.
We did.
Great
Remember
country.
that? Me and Chris went to Norway. How long ago was that? 4 years? Maybe 2017?
Probably, yeah.
Me and Chris went to Norway and we went to Stavanger. Is that how you say Stavanger? And we climbed Trolltunga or something.
Yeah,
climbed.
Rock.
We went up to 2 rocks basically up some mountains. We went to this place. You might have seen it on social media. In fact, I'll put it on the YouTube. I'll get Bradley to ping it up. There's one where there's basically a big boulder in between 2 mountains. I still to this day, right, if I think about that, I get like a little bit of a shiver. Like I think it's like quite like, I always think like, oh, what if you fell off? And that was pretty cool. Norway in general was good, yeah.
It's a really nice country.
Awesome.
Extremely expensive beer.
It was mega money on it. Yeah, it was great. That was
you
good.
got like 10 quid a pint, like, fuck, that's expensive.
That was good. Good job, I'm a shite drinker. Right, worst piece of advice. So this could be, maybe it's not the worst piece of advice you've been given, maybe something you hear regurgitated, or just something that you just don't think's true that you hear. Maybe you've been told yourself, or you hear maybe coaches or gurus tell people. Worst piece of advice.
I know we kind of touched on it quite a lot, but this whole kind of like perhaps damaged metabolism and stuff like that, that is definitely common, where people just think like they don't have the belief that they can drop body fat because their metabolism's broken or is damaged or something like that. It's probably not the worst one, but that's the first thing that came to mind based on that discussion.
Awesome. So probably limiting beliefs, that kind of thing. Where yeah, cool. And then the last one, the best piece of advice, whether it's life advice, gym advice, nutrition advice. What is the one best piece of advice?
It's a quote. Do what you said you're going to do.
Yeah.
We said it quite a few times on the podcast, but if you said you're going to do something, do it.
I think that is massive. Yeah. It builds up your self-belief, builds up your self-confidence. You want to be that person that does do exactly that. And
even if you don't want to do it, if you said you're doing it, do it, because you'll learn to say no next time.
Exactly.
That's a big thing for me. Like if I say like I'm just going to do X, Y, Z, it's like I have to do it. You know?
Brilliant.
You have to, and then you're accountable to that quote or whatever. Like I got it written on my whiteboard. Like I'm building like a big members lab for my clients, and you know I have to record something every week, and it's very time intensive. At the bottom of it, I got do what you said you're going to do. So it's like every time I look at it, it's well, okay, I'm still going to do that. If I don't do it, I'm letting my clients down, let myself down, let my business down. So do what you said you're going to do.
What I like doing with that, a little tip for everyone, and I do this all the time because I'm cocky like that, I guess some people would say, but what I like to do, what people maybe don't realise is, I'll sometimes declare stuff publicly, or I'll tell my clients or tell my friends about it. It's not because I want to fucking be like, oh, I'm doing this. It's because I know that actually it's much, much harder to fail in private, in public. I always say that quote. It's easy to fail in private. If you don't tell anyone, there's more chance that you won't do it. But it's that pressure, that accountability, and you sometimes don't want to let people close to you down. So if you tell them, you might actually have more chance of doing it than if you just kind of keep it secret yourself. So do what you said you were going to do. Awesome. And
Absolutely.
We're done.
Nice.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. That's it. Please hit like, comment, subscribe, all the things that you know that I would like you to do. And most importantly, don't just share it willy-nilly all over the internet. Pick one person who you think would benefit from this podcast and just pass it on to them. You'll find all Chris's socials below. I'll give you all the information that you need. Thank you for listening. Been a blast.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.
Great chat.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Aesthetically Trained, the podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and spread the word.